If you watched Beat the Breakout all season long, you know we've been trying to stash those valuable players before your league mates do, and that's how a lot of you might have wound up with a guy like Tyrone Tracy or Cedric Tillman on your roster. But you know what? It's almost playoff time. Let's start looking at the guys you really want to stash. It's those RB handcuffs. There just aren't that many rookies left that we haven't seen, and not that many players worth stashing. I'll tell you my top 8 RB handcuffs to stash in order. It doesn't necessarily matter if you have the starting running back here or not, because somebody else's handcuff could become your stud if that player gets injured. And let's start with Jordan Mason. That's right, he's got to be number 1. So sure, CMC is back. Seems like he's healthy. He hasn't been quite as explosive as before, but that doesn't matter. He's still going to get all the touches here. Jordan Mason does not have any more value anymore, except for on your bench. And yes, he should be stashed because there is no guarantee that CMC will not get re-injured in some way, shape, or form, even if it's not the same injury. Look, if you have CMC, you absolutely have to get Jordan Mason. And even if you don't, I think it's smart to add him anyways. It's not that long ago, and people have short memories, but remember when Jordan Mason was a no doubt must start the first 6 weeks of the season when he was the main running back in San Francisco? He was averaging 5.1 yards per carry this season, and in weeks 1 through 6, he averaged over 100 rushing yards per game. So I understand why a lot of people have dropped Mason because he really has no standalone value anymore, but he still has a tremendous amount of value if something should happen to CMC. This 49ers offense, despite not having a true running quarterback, is still top 10 in rush attempts on the season. Mason's still out there in about half of all fantasy leagues. Again, I'll say it, even if you don't have CMC, if Mason is available, I think you got to stash him. Number 2 should come as no surprise either. It's going to be Tyler Algier, another running back we thought could have some standalone value at times. He's been worth a flex. His production has taken a step back this year because Bijan has really now taken over the RB role. There is no more kind of mixing and sharing here. Thankfully, Arthur Smith is gone. And so Bijan has finally claimed this backfield as it should be. So no, you can't necessarily flex Tyler Algier or ever feel good about it, but he is still super valuable because if Bijan goes down, that's a huge opportunity for a guy like Algier. Even though Algier hasn't carried the ball that much, only hit double-digit rush attempts 3 times this season, he's still getting a ton of red zone looks, and that's where he can definitely help you out because he can score touchdowns regardless of whether Bijan is in or not, but especially if Bijan should go down. In fact, just this season, even with Bijan there and healthy all season long, although he has slightly fewer red zone carries, it's pretty close, 52% to 42% red zone share. Inside the 10-yard line alone, they have the exact same amount of carries, and inside the 5-yard line, Algier actually has more carries. Now, Algier has not converted on all those carries, but the point is, they trust him to the goal line. If you have Bijan, you have to have Algier. If you don't, this is still a player worth grabbing. At number 3, I'm going to go with the running back that was drafted second in this year's class. It's Trey Benson of Arizona. Now, Benson's actually kind of creeping towards possible flex value, even with Connor still there. You know, the Cards are coming off their bye. A lot of times we see that post-bye bump. A rookie running back gets more involved. I don't expect a significant bump because James Conner's been so good this year and he's still stayed intact. Somehow all these old running backs who are close to or already 30 years old have somehow just completely avoided injury. Go figure. But even despite that, we have seen Benson get more involved. Like, he looked like he was just going to be completely invisible this season. And in fact, between week 7 and 8, he only had a total of 1 touch. It looked like he was just being ignored. But then we saw 8 carries and then 10 carries. Will this coming week be even more of a workload for him? It's possible. The problem there is that Amari Demercado is still in the mix, and he's actually been pretty good as well. So it's hard to see standalone value, but I will say if something happens to Connor, even if Demercado is in the mix, Trey Benson has so much upside. This offense will definitely continue to run the ball, and Benson has looked good at times. At number 4, going to go with Ray Davis in Buffalo. Now, Ray Davis was hot for a minute because he had that really long touchdown a couple of weeks ago. And then we realized, yeah, he's just the backup. We cannot trust necessarily anybody other than James Cook in this backfield. But hey, we're talking handcuffs. I think Davis is definitely interesting because we know Buffalo does like to run the ball, and especially in the red zone as well. James Cook has been a little bit up and down, but one thing he has done a lot of is score touchdowns, 10 touchdowns on the ground for James Cook already this year. That's because the Bills have the sixth highest rush rate inside the red zone. Of course, part of that Josh Allen's presence, but obviously Cook already in double-digit TDs. You know that if he isn't there, Ray Davis as even bigger bodied back, he's definitely getting all the carries at that point. And for what it's worth, I do think this is more of a manifestation of the game script and the way things went last week against the Chiefs. But James Cook registered a season low 38% snap share. Now, it wasn't all Ray Davis on the field when Cook was off. It was a lot of Ty Johnson, passing game situations. But Davis has shown the ability to break tackles. He's a tough runner. He can catch the ball, and he's got some explosiveness. So this is a guy who definitely has a high ceiling. Got a couple more running backs to talk about. First, before I get to the Rams offense, I'll talk about Matt Stafford. If he gets a yard this week, you could win. I'm talking about underdog. If you do NFL pick'ems on underdog, then you already know how this works. If you haven't tried it yet, you're a new customer on underdog, you get a free pick. It's Matthew Stafford going higher than zero point 0.5 total yards. And if you haven't tried underdog yet, just make sure you use code ENDGAME when you check out because it gets you the free pick plus up to $1,000 of bonus cash on your first deposit. That brings me to Blake Corum. Now, Blake Corum is a guy I really expected a little bit more from this season. I really thought he would at least be in the mix for some touches, but I should have known, right? Sean McVay, what does he do? He takes one guy, puts him at running back, and he just runs him into the ground. And it's still Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams has held up as somehow as every other running back this season, no injuries. But Kyren Williams is absolutely the definition of a bell cow here. As far as team snap share for the running back position, second among all running backs. Team route share, second among all running backs. And as far as actual market share for carries and rush attempts, first. That's right. Nobody is getting more of their team's rush attempts than Kyren Williams. This is actually a good thing for Blake Corum's potential value because you see what happens if Kyren Williams goes down. Then we have Blake Corum becoming an absolute workhorse. It's going to happen. We know Sean McVay rolls that way, and you just saw the numbers there. It just goes to show that Blake Corum could be a huge factor. But of course, we would need something to happen to Kyren first. Not saying we want it, but you've got to plan for it, especially if you have Kyren. And even if you don't, this is still a very smart stash to make. And for what it's worth, Corum has not been great this year. Only 3.6 yards per carry, 28 attempts, 101 yards. But again, that's such a small sample. If he just rips off one explosive run, that average jumps over 4 per carry. And again, the potential in this offense is just so good, especially for touchdowns. All right, now at 6, let's go to Braylon Allen. Some people might think he should be higher. We've heard a lot about Braylon Allen. You might remember all the way back in week 2, he had that 2-touchdown game. Everybody was freaking out about Breece Hall, worried about Braylon Allen taking over part of this backfield, and maybe Braylon Allen was going to be somebody that you had to pick up. Even though the next week he had 11 carries, and again, people were panicking even more. It just completely fell off after that, and look, honestly, the wheels have just fallen off this entire Jets offense. You know the deal. Coach fired, now GM fired. Aaron Rodgers is washed. I think we can officially say that. And Breece Hall has still maintained his value. He's not the problem. The problem is we have no idea what this snap share is going to be for either of these running backs on a weekly basis. So a lot of people drop Braylon Allen. But once again, if something should happen to Breece Hall, it's going to be all Braylon Allen, and then he goes back to being super valuable. The problem is I just don't feel as good about him because he's in this Jets offense. It's really just confounding exactly what's going on. We have no idea why. It really isn't either just all Breece Hall or partly Braylon Allen. It's like every single week they have no idea what's going on, which makes sense when you consider head coach, offense coordinator, GM are all gone. For his part, Braylon Allen has looked good. He's a big back. He can score. He can catch the ball. He's shown soft hands. Braylon Allen will have value if he's actually given the opportunity. I just don't know when that's going to happen. At number 7, I'm going to go with Zach Charbonnet, who is still the backup to Kenneth Walker, not the 1B to his 1A. Look, Sharp is taking a backseat, predictably, and maybe that's how it should be. Kenneth Walker finally getting a role as a pass catcher, and he's produced, and Kenneth Walker is clearly the better back here. I will say this, while Charbonnet will have value, and we saw it early in the season when Kenneth Walker did miss a couple of games, it's still underwhelming when you look at the body work Sharps has put up, not just this year, but last year. He's had some chances, to have that backfield to himself. And he's just kind of barely produced. And even in the times he gets the ball, look, even if you're not the guy, if you just come in on a series or two, you've got to make the most of your opportunities. And I don't feel like he has. Like he's only averaging 3.3 yards per carry as a runner. The only reason he even still has value now is because he is a good receiver and he still gets targets, whether Walker's there or not. He does have 27 catches on the season, and it's a pretty good offense. So the Seahawks will score. So only if Walker goes down will Charbonnet then have fantasy value. It's not as much as we thought it should be. And the Seahawks really don't run the ball that much this year. It's another thing. They talked about establishing the run. They have the fourth fewest rush attempts out of any team in the NFL. And so I don't love Sharp's upside nearly as much as the guys I've already mentioned, but I still think he's worth a stash if you've got the room and those others are not available. And then at number 8, how about a guy who maybe is threatening to become part of the timeshare here in Minnesota, Cam Akers? So it was interesting that they traded for him to get him back. Remember, Akers was with Minnesota last year. And, Ty Chandler just doesn't seem to be relevant anymore. Okay, fine. I guess they don't have confidence in Chandler. What's noteworthy is that the last couple of weeks, Akers' snap share and his carries have continued to go up. Maybe that's something to do with Aaron Jones getting injured a couple of weeks ago, the ribs. Maybe they were still bothering him last week. It's possible, but it is also possible that they want Akers in the mix here, maybe to keep Aaron Jones fresh. Maybe there's some confidence in Cam Akers from his former OC, Kevin O'Connell. Hey, whatever it is, I know that Akers will get a lot of touches. He has not been super efficient at all, but as the season goes on and he continues to recover from last season's latest injury, you never know. At the very least, this is an offense that is definitely scoring points, and opportunity is all that really matters for running backs. Those are some of the players you should be grabbing now to prepare yourself for a playoff run. Make those smart stashes, continue to be active. You've got to do that. And of course, make those smart start sit decisions. If you didn't catch all the videos for this week, it's all on the playlist.